Smart Energy 2025 is just around the corner. The annual renewables event of the year returns to Sydney on April 9 and 10. In the midst of a federal election focused on energy, be amongst key decision makers and 12,000 delegates to showcase your solutions, expand your network, and position your brand for growth. As the Smart Energy Council celebrates its 70th anniversary, there's no better place to be than at Smart Energy 2025. Visit smartenergyexpo.org.au for details.
Welcome back to Just Another Solar Podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me. Karl Jensen. G'day, Karl.
Luke, how you going? Been a pretty hectic week all round for industry news. Going to be a hell of an episode.
And we've got Jess MacPherson in Adelaide there. How are you, Jess?
Yeah, good. We've had a scorcher. It's been a lot of great days for solar. Heaps of great feedback to me about the last episode, and this one's going to be a ripper as well, I'd say.
And industry legend Nigel Morris. G'day, mate.
G'day, team. Nice to be here. I'm still fired up. I got opinions.
Sorry, Jess, I have to know. Tell us more about, I think we saw on the news that Adelaide was the hottest place anywhere in the world at 45 degrees.
Couple of spots got to almost 50. I saw 48 on the Mercury from a friend on a Snapchat. So everyone's just been, I'm pretty heavily involved in the Surf Lifesaving Club a bit south of the city, and it's been hectic for us, just everyone being at the beach trying to cool off, and a palm tree caught on fire spontaneously. And it's been going on here in Adelaide, and now everyone's here for the golf. So,
I saw a great photo of Selix. There was more people on Selix Beach because you can drive down onto Selix Beach.
Yep.
And there was more people on Selix Beach than I think there'd ever been recorded in the history of South Australia.
Yeah, that's where I patrol. So we've been very busy, very busy.
Man.
But it's great. It's best spot in the world. I don't blame people for wanting to head on down. Back to the solar.
Nigel, you like to get excited about things. We're going to call it early. The quote of the decade.
Oh, this is just an absolute cracker. Now, I'm not going to say who it was who said this, but let's just say that they were extremely influential and important in a federal sense. And what he said to me was this: solar installers thought they were just sparkies, but they've actually become essential service providers who now represent 60% of NEM generation assets. So have a think about that for a moment, because what it's highlighting, and I've been working on all the presentations for coming roadshows that I'm about to do, and I've got to do a market overview and talk about backstop and dynamic and everything else. And the question is, why have we got all this? And the short answer is because solar is now 60% of the capacity in the NEM. You might think you're a man in a van, but you're actually contributing to 60% of the capacity in the entire country now. And every one of those little systems that goes in is another blip on that. So you're not just a sparky whacking solar panels on roof. What did I see the other day? 37,000 solar panels a day going in Australia. And when you multiply that out, the solar retailers and solar installers out there are working hard every single day. You're not just solar guys, you're essential service providers. You are the majority of generation in the NEM.
Well, Solar Nerds released their Awards Edition 2024, which showed us that the market last year was 3.3 gigawatts. So it was up from 3.1. And I encourage you to jump on there. It breaks down by retailers. It breaks down by a whole bunch of data by state. And there was a questionnaire. And one of the interesting ones I saw, the question was, where do you get your news from? Top one was social media, and it went down to conferences, Renew Economy, PV Mag, Eco Generation, Solar Cutters. And at 9% of the industry, they said the Just Another Solar podcast. That's where they got their news from.
So 10% of the solar industry relies on beating.
We're gonna have to get a bit more serious, guys. We're gonna have to be like journalists with integrity, I think.
What's a better percentage than my household?
We're just like shooting the breeze. If people believe this, they'll believe anything.
Oh, that is unreal.
Shooting the breeze. Sorry, Nigel. I saw something on Instagram where you had a look at a Stark electric motorbike, and I always love to hear about your exploits with electric motorbikes because you're the only guy that has a Harley.
I did. I got to touch a Stark. I haven't actually seen one in the flesh before, and I dropped in at Solar Gain Wangaratta on a road trip through Victoria earlier this week, and oh man, I want the enduro version. So I said to Bradley, just you give me a hoy when the new enduro version rocks up, mate, because I don't need another motorbike, but who doesn't need a Varg?
Foaming at the mouth at 80 horsepower on that tiny little bike.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And Nigel, we need to get an update on the backstop in Victoria. What's the latest on that?
I'll give you the short version. It's still broken. It varies in how broken it is, but it is still broken. This week we came across new breakages, things that hadn't been broken a week ago that are now broken. So it is a monumental shit fight. There is an end in sight. I don't know when it ends, but they clearly must be feeling the pressure. It's nice to think that the federal government's listening to us and have heard how catastrophically fucked the whole thing is. Because it is a disaster. So, let's just hope that it doesn't drag on too much longer. Luckily, everyone's being patient and trying to be as understanding as they can. But, the costs mount every single day. As I said to someone on another podcast, I got interviewed by our old friend Pat Southwell earlier on today on this very issue. And I highlighted that, we've probably had something like 30 or 40% of all the people in our business consumed by this for the last 2-3 weeks, if not more. Every day that goes by, it is costing business money. So we just have to pray that it'll be over soon.
You mean to say 2 to 3 months, though, Nigel, not 2 to 3 weeks?
Well, yeah, we've been aware of it we've been working on it for months and months and months, but the major disasters they started creeping into our system in December. But the last few weeks it's become really painful and really evident, and the phone has started ringing. So every installer who's using us has been on the phone going, "Why isn't this working?" And we're going, "Because of DNSPs."
It's actually really hard to explain to an end customer. You can explain to a solar installer and solar business, but explaining to an end customer without sounding like you're trying to shift blame is very difficult.
Very difficult. And for what it's worth, I've been chatting with Pat today on his show. I highlighted that not only are we hearing, problems getting systems commissioned and certainly systems being limited to, zero export or very, very low levels of export, we're also seeing systems being zero generation. So the inverter is turned off. Actually, Pat commented on when he was chatting to me that he's personally seen more than 30 systems in his auditing role as an inspector. He's seen 30 systems that are zero production. So not even just export limited, but zero production. This is really bad.
It is, and I'd like to change tack because in New South Wales, they have the PDRS scheme, which is the peak demand reduction scheme. I want to hear how that's going, Nigel. Have you got some input?
I do. I've got some gossip on that too, because I've been speaking to a number of people about that who've highlighted that the money's not flowing. Do the system, apply for the rebate, get it processed, go to your broker, blah, 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 blah. Then the rebate should come back to you as a solar business because you've discounted the system for the customer. It's not a lot of money, but if you're busy, then it can add up very, very quickly. And a quick count from a number of different solar retailers and wholesalers that I spoke to today, there is more than $500,000 already outstanding in rebate payments to solar businesses in New South Wales. So not only did they cripple the industry, and we talked about this when we interviewed Imran in the Solar Nerds Data about how New South Wales fell off a cliff when they announced this too early, but now the scheme's actually rolling, systems are going in, and now the money's not flowing because of delays in payments and in some cases several months overdue. Hundreds of thousands of dollars can send a business to the wall. So I'm aware there's a lot of conversations going on with IPART and the government and everything else. And I'm also aware that this scheme is potentially a template for a federal scheme. So it's really important that it's done right. It's really important that all the boxes are ticked and that everyone's safe. And of course, everyone's nervous because they don't want it to be another pink bat scheme. Dare I even mention it? But that money has to flow. And, I really, really, really feel for New South Wales businesses. They have copped a flogging over the last 6 months.
It's also a shame to see that almost every other week we seem to be having a crisis meeting, and we had one this week that was run by the Smart Energy Council. This is all around the coalition's policies that they've announced coming into the federal election, and there's a fair bit of information in there. Obviously, the big plan is to go to nuclear reactors and to, in the meantime, keep coal going and to support that even more, to ramp up gas generation. But also in the devil is in the detail here, that they also want to cap renewables at 54%. When you do the back of a napkin maths, or quite calculated maths, that means July next year. We're facing the potential of a government that's going to cap renewables heavily from July next year.
That seems pretty nuts, Luke, because they reckon the average renewable content in the grid just a year ago was 30%. So if we're growing at that kind of rate, obviously you get to 100% in a few years. It seems completely crazy to even consider nuclear.
Well, it seems crazy when Adelaide is the hottest place on Earth, and we're talking about ramping up coal and ramping up gas.
Oh, yeah. And, how much water do you need to run nuclear? Like, I don't know. It's just, it feels silly to me that it's even a conversation. Like, I appreciate that there are parts of the world that it's very viable. I do. It just doesn't seem, I can't see a single really good reason for it. And then honestly, as a young person, like, it actually makes me very depressed to think about what the next 4 years of my life might look like if this election goes one way or the other. Yeah, it's really sad, not just for the industry, but just like in general. It's quite upsetting.
Interestingly, Jessica, the young person of the TikToks, it was highlighted on that webinar that it's actually the young people who are being targeted by these campaigns. And John Grimes highlighted that they now believe there's at least 50 million in the war chest for promotion of the anti-renewables campaign. They showed all these images of, billboards that renewables cost the earth and, blah, 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 all this garbage that's being spouted about renewables. I had so the young people have really, we've really got to reach the young people, and we've really got to counter this campaign. And that was what John was on about, was really we've actually really got to get our shit together, because the election's going to happen around mid-April by the looks of it, which is not far away. And we've really got to get out and fight against this campaign of disinformation. The fact that nuclear is, I think, and I've said this before, nuclear is a giant red herring. They don't even have to deal with it. They'll be out of power in 1 or 2 or 3 parliamentary sessions if they win. So they won't actually ever have to build it, because they'll be gone by the time it's done. So they'll get to have some community consultations and some, feedback sessions and, deal with a bit of argy-bargy, but they won't actually have to build anything. But it's the damage that they're going to do to consumer sentiment along the way that's the issue. And I had a really excellent question given to me today by someone who I really respect, who said, how much impact do you reckon this is really going to have if Dutton wins? Because, let's face it, as much as we love Albo's policy, he's not really setting anyone on fire with his exuberance for anything.
Chris is, though. Chris is kicking ass as the energy minister. He's doing a great job.
He's killing it. He's killing it. Yeah.
I see lots of anti-Chris postings here, there, and everywhere, but I reckon he's doing a top job.
So that's talking about what's happening in Australia, but let's talk about the Trump effect and what effect it might have on Australia and our industry, Nigel. What's going on?
Well, lo and behold, it's only days since USAID had the Trump/Musk effect, where they slashed and burned. And I heard today that this is already affecting Australian solar businesses. There's a company that I know that commented to me today that they had been awarded a project in the South Pacific, a multi-million-dollar project, multiple aid agencies who were contributing towards a very large multi-million-dollar solar project. They called today and said, sorry, we've got no cash. Elon took the cash. So there are already Australian, and a lot of Australian businesses operate in the South Pacific. So, we're already feeling this. So, I didn't think it'd happen that quick, but man, it's already real.
We have to follow Scotty Young's rules, which is bad news story and good news story. And this is a glad, sad thing. I want to shout out to Jim Thompson from Outback Solar. Jim's out there in Kalgoorlie. He's been in the industry 26 years, but he's had a fascinating journey. He came from mining and oil rigs. Jim's been out there doing lots of off-grid remote stuff, running a solar business in Kalgoorlie. Jim went through a cancer battle, and then he had a stroke. Then he did a triathlon. Then he was doing CrossFit. Then he was an extra in a Tim Winton TV series as a bare knuckle boxer.
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
I had to dig it up on his Facebook just to verify it because I remember seeing it years ago. But he's someone who has tirelessly pushed for great solar. He's a one-of-a-kind character who anyone who's met Jim or interacted with him knows he's the real deal. He's a tough, he's a rough, he's an honest, genuine bloke. And the industry will miss you, Jim. All the best for the future, mate.
Yeah, I'll second that. I've known Jim for decades, and he's just been tireless in his work. And Jim, I'll miss you terribly. I'm going to call him when we're done. I'm very sad to hear he's going, but I understand.
I'll say on the podcast the same thing I put on the post on Cutters or whatever. There's life, Jim, but not as we know it. So ultimately, go out there and enjoy your retirement. Well-deserved, well-earned. And there's a whole new world out there of other stuff that is a lot easier than working.
Before we introduce a guest, I'm going to ask you listeners a question. Have you booked your tickets to the Smart Energy Expo yet? It's on the 9th and 10th of April at Sydney's ICC. There's also an awards night and gala dinner the night before on the 8th. This is a very important show to get to. I know we're all busy and you always try and assess whether it's worthwhile or not. I'm going to tell you flat out that this one is worthwhile, particularly coming up to an election that's going to be decided on energy and cost of living. So you're going to rub shoulders with the top people in the industry, decision makers, and there's going to be something for everyone there. And there's all the networking experiences. This is the one you want to get to. So make sure you book your tickets. We're going to be doing a live show there. And we're also doing the Winner Smart Energy podcast competition. I've got more details coming up soon. I've built some of the best relationships at the Smart Energy Expo, some of the best input and some of the best interactions I've had. So make sure 9th and 10th of April, we want you to be there and it'll be great to catch up with everyone.
And just a shout out for the AY's breakfast on the 10th as well. I'll be there. I'd love to see you guys there.
The ICCC, right, International Convention Centre in Sydney, which is a great venue. It actually works really well there. There's a lot of opportunity for just networking. I seem to recall we actually just went down to a bar and did a live podcast at a bar at one of those events. And the number of people who were just floating around and, you know, they can come and go from the CBD in Sydney and pop down to the ICCC. It's really easy to get to if you're anywhere in Sydney. So, yeah, really worth dropping in. It's going to be a great show.
And if you want to see Karl, he'll be at the Plenar Bar, which is at the bottom of the escalators. That's his residency.
Park himself there. That's a good spot.
And you can visit the smartenergyexpo.org.au for details. Our guest who popped in at some point since we started, he flew from Brisbane to Tamworth or Brisbane to Sydney to Tamworth, is someone who's known to a lot of you. Geoff Bragg has been around the industry for a long time. He's a managing director of Sunman Solar. He's a training and standards director of the Smart Energy Council. He's deputy chair at SEIA. Welcome to the podcast, Geoff.
Thanks so much, Luke. Thanks for having me.
Just for those who don't know you, I think anyone who's been to a roadshow or trade show or seen training things, they're probably familiar with you. But do you just want to give a brief history on how you got to the industry and what you've been doing since then?
Yeah, so I'm one of these old guys who started out doing off-grid many years ago, you know, driving off in a ute somewhere to the top of a hill, up some track to build an off-grid system. And that was about just over 20 years ago, about 23 years ago. And I just stuck with it. And, you know, you stick with something and you're passionate about and interested in it, you kind of do lots of different things. And that's led me to doing CPD training and being involved with industry associations, as you mentioned. And so now, just the last couple of years, I've been working with the Smart Energy Council doing standards and training.
I have to jump in here, Geoff. When I found out you're on the podcast, I was super excited. You and I get along like a house on fire. Absolutely love it that we're actually giving people real life stuff about how to do their job in the most fantastic presentations that you always do. Everyone's excited. The way you present is magnificent. And if anyone who hasn't been to one of your training sessions, they should absolutely get along to one. I get heaps out of them. My favorite, I talk about EV chargers all the time, circuit breaker derating and so on and so forth. I've got you to thank for that one. I picked up and learned a hell of a lot of stuff.
Come on, there's a lot more. Circuit breaker deratings? Really? Is that the best? Come on. I've seen Geoff do much more exciting stuff than circuit breaker deratings, Karl.
Look, I see it all the time in all the forums. Oh, my charger clicks off. If only they went to Geoff's training, they'd know better, and they would have asked for something better. So
and when you're in the training and you come up with some little thing like that and you say it, you look out at the audience and all the eyebrows go up. You know, hang on a minute, they haven't thought about this before.
Yeah, totally.
So and
totally.
You know, hopefully you have one of those moments, you know, during any sort of training session. The eyebrows go up. It's a good indicator.
Well, we should ask you, Geoff, what makes your eyebrows go up with the stuff that you see and hear in the feedback from these people in the training?
Trying to stay connected with what's actually happening on the ground. That's what people enjoy. They like pictures, you know, they don't want to see diagrams of inverters. They want to go, oh, it's a X, it's a Y, it's a Sungrow, it's a Tesla. So people can relate to it, you know, trying to take the diagrams and all the damn clauses, you know, it's about the driest material you can possibly try and deliver. And
until it gets exciting with the circuit breakers, brings the house down.
So, yeah, it's not easy, honestly. And the one advantage of when I do stuff online is if it's on video, they can speed it up a bit to get through it quicker. There's been some complaints recently about that. So we've allowed the speed dial on the video on some of the training materials I've been doing. But it's connecting with people, you know, people that do the same thing that I've done. And I still get out there and do installations, a limited number every year, but just to stay in touch with the equipment and, you know, what you have to do. And I actually really enjoy it.
Geoff, the one that raises my eyebrows is still the talk about MEN links and having a switchboard enclosure inside a switchboard for backup stuff. Ultimately, I think that, you know, the industry's got a lot of growing into that space, and we're seeing more and more systems that have got these capabilities, and of course they're getting more and more complex. There's just an enormous amount of learning to do for everybody, and, you know, we just need another 20 more of you.
The latest round of roadshows I've just come from, we've been dealing with the battery standard 5139, and, you know, it's been around since 2019, so it's not new, but we're all still struggling to kind of interpret it. And I think things like the New South Wales PDRS scheme, where an installer's kind of doing their work and taking a million selfies and collecting evidence along the way to comply with the PDRS, but with this feeling of a regulator literally hovering over your shoulder. You know, that's what it feels like. Everything's being audited, and so you've really got to be careful that you don't slip up. And it's actually really tricky. You know, there's a lot of rules. It's really difficult to get through an installation and comply with all of them. That was the reasoning behind going around and talking yet again about 5139 and all the rules, because it's like the installers are under a microscope. And it's intimidating, to be frank. You know, when you go and do an installation, you're thinking, if I miss one step, am I going to miss out on my $2,000 battery rebate?
That's so much about the value of what you provide, Geoff. And I'm not on the tools, but I hear it every day, and I hear people talking about the fact that we are the most regulated industry probably in the country. You know, I don't know that any other industry has as much regulation and oversight as we do. And so for anyone, particularly in New South Wales doing batteries, or if you're in Victoria doing backstop, or, you know, anywhere else in the country, you know, you need to be at these courses just to work out how to comply, right?
And it's driving people, you know, like that level of compliance, like it's really getting under people's skin. There was a guy I saw at a roadshow in Canberra just a couple of days ago who was at the end of the roadshow. He said, I've got to go. I feel like I'm going to explode, you know, thinking about all of the stuff that you've just talked about. And I said, oh, look, I'm sorry. He said, no, it's not your fault. It's just the layer on layer on layer, you know, like we have to comply with this. We have to, you know, the connection applications, the intent to connect, the documents, the photographs, the keeping records of handing certain documents to customers before we start, and, you know, and then the DER register, and the amount of duplication of the same information that when you start with a design and a quote, how many times do you actually have to feed that information into different databases before you get to the end?
And all the while you're working with like electrical equipment and trying not to get fried, right? Like, you still, at the end of the day, you're being an electrician as well as taking the same photo for 4 different people. And, like quality businesses also want you to take photos that they can send to the customer and have for their own records. And then you've already taken that same photo 4 times. Like, it's frustrating, it's time consuming, and it's so much to remember.
I saw a ripper show on YouTube about, the pros and cons of the new Powerwall 3. And this was a UK thing. And the guy says, oh, look, you can connect up this isolator, but there's nothing to stop a customer touching it. And whilst we're working with live DC, there's a risk that, while we're doing something else or we're commissioning it and we're using the app, that the customer might stick their fingers in and electrocute themselves. And I thought to myself, what the hell are you doing working on live stuff, mate? That regulation is really important so that people don't have those problems.
So it's a really good point, Geoff. How do just regular human beings, solar installers, how do you advise them to actually keep track of all this stuff? Is it about checklists? I mean, how do you actually keep track of all this continuously updating stuff? I mean, we have this challenge in our business of continuously changing products, and we have to continuously update our manuals and our instructions and our guidance and all those kinds of things. And yeah, the complexity that you're talking about with all these standards and regulations is another level again. How do average humans do that?
I don't know, and it's the fact that it's been a layer on layer on layer. That is the thing. It's like if you go back, I don't know, 10 years, like when I started, right? We used to a solar system. There was an inverter. You put it on the wall. There was like one string of panels. You connected the wires and you turned on the switch, and that was it. And you went bill to the customer. Happy days. There was literally, when we used to do applications for grid connections, it was a paper form, and they put a rubber stamp on it. All of that now, the collection of information on top of meeting all of the standards and things, which have all become more complex. Yeah, it's layer on layer on layer.
And to poke a bear on Luke's behalf, you can see why people were pretty frustrated. There was quite a lot of chatter on Cutters and then many, many forums about mandatory paid learning from the SEIA. Would you like to share some thoughts and feelings there, Geoff?
Sure, yeah. No, that's been quite, people haven't been very happy about that. And in the position I'm in, which is actually, I don't work for SEIA and I'm not on the board anymore. I was some months ago, but I'm not anymore. And through that process and being involved with SEIA, I've known that this mandatory training was coming up because it's been planned for a very long time because of 4777 coming in. And I was actually I put together some courses for CPD training, 6 of them, and had been delivering them for the SEC. And anyway, I was engaged to actually produce a mandatory module and try and condense those 6 down into one thing, which is what's happened. And I certainly understand people's frustration because it's like the stuff we've just been talking about. It's yet another thing that's been sort of dropped on installers as if they haven't got enough to worry about.
No, I think part of the argument was also that there was only one accredited course, only one course where they could get the CPD points initially. I believe that they've opened up to GSES and maybe a couple of others is what I've heard, but there was initially when it was just the SEIA pushing this mandatory AS4777 training at $30 or whatever it was, people were complaining about that. But then I know solar cutters were very mobilised. I believe SEIA mobilised as well, and you're a deputy director of SEIA. And I can see that point. I think it's fair that if there's mandatory training, I don't think it matters who provides it as long as it ticks the boxes. But that seemed, a lot of the arguments seem to be, it's the same old argument with the CPD points that, we have to do so much more and there's more regulation and layer upon layer. But in this case, it was, hey, the SEIA has told us that this is mandatory and we can only get it from them. So that did change, thankfully, and good on everyone who pushed for change there.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've, SEIA have published something. It's right on the top of their website if people want information about it. But you're dead right. They've made it so that anybody who's got a course that can cover those main points on 4777.1, GSES has a module, the SEC 6 modules that I put together that are available through Smart Installer, and anything else. If anyone comes up with another course, you can approach SEIA to see whether it'll be accepted. So that's really good. And so there are more options now. Am
I right that the anger that we saw online and the frustration that we saw online was actually not about SEIA really? it was actually about just another bloody thing to do, right? And it's about this quagmire of rules, regulations, and at what point did you? I'm going to ask you this, Geoff, because you're so deep in this space. Are we overregulated? Is it time to push back and just go, you know what? Get your hands off. We're actually already overregulated, and you're now actually starting to put businesses at risk, and as Jess highlighted, people at risk, because they're so focused on just trying to meet the compliance requirements that they can't focus on just doing a good quality job and being safe.
Absolutely. You actually need, to be doing the compliance side of things, you kind of need another person to be hovering around while the electrician does the risky work. I think the bit that I get most upset about is when I can see another one coming where we create more complexity and double up again with another set of databases and applications and whatever. So, we're just about to go into the backstop mechanism discussion for New South Wales, and AEMO's putting their foot down on the whole country. But of course, as you've been talking about, Nigel, there's 100 different rules from different DNSPs, processes, lists. Really, it's being enforced by AEMO, which is a national thing. I mean, it's too late now, but wouldn't it have been great if they'd have actually set up something and said, right, we're going to take 2 or 3 years to do this before they started in South Australia, and said, let's create a national way of doing this in one way. There's another sort of duplication change. What if you're working in multiple states? You have to learn a new method. Of course, you're a manufacturer. You've got to deal with all these different complexities of different states. So that doesn't make sense. And on top of that, what if we get a national battery rebate? Like, I'm already at about 6 layers of adding the information in. So how many duplications of the same information you've got to put into different databases? That's in New South Wales with the PDRS, with STCs, with connection applications, with the DER register. When you add all these layers on top of each other, and then we come and put another one on top of it. Dare I say it, that's sort of Trumpy and wipe the slate clean, and wouldn't it be great to kind of start again? Is kind of tempting. But
who's the Australian version of Musk? How do we get a Doge down here?
When I saw that teacup storm raging, I thought to myself, I'd love to pay $30 to get in on one of Jeff's training courses.
Good on you.
Pay $30.
The people who've done it, people who've done it don't complain generally. They complain about having to have done it, but they say the course is pretty good. So I read the feedback every day. Hundreds and hundreds of people have done it already. So it's not that bad for anybody who's considering doing the SEIA course.
I hope you cover breakers.
But I just think that this is good work, right? Like the work that solar electricians are doing, like we talk about how many more solar electricians we need to reach our targets by 2030 and all of those targets, and we need more people, and it's good work. It's hard work. It's good work that these people are doing. Like they should feel good about doing good work. They should be paid well. They should have it should be a good life for people who are doing good work. That's really what it boils down to. And exactly like you said, Geoff, I don't think anyone really minds having to learn the stuff. I think people in the solar industry like to push through that, mountain of crap. They have to love it. That some part of them in their bones has to love it. And it's not the content that's the issue. It's just one more thing on the pile that's grinding people's gears. It's pretty
Such
obvious.
Wise words from the youth, from the TikTokers. Jesus Christ, Jess. Now I know why you're here.
Go easy, Nige. She hasn't called us old in this episode yet. It gets dropped at every point.
Hey,
so
we got
be
time
nice,
left.
be kind. All right, so Geoff, talking about CPD points, the scheme was passed over to SEIA, and you were involved in that from the CEC. And there were some changes to the structure of the scheme and how CPD points are awarded and how they have to be earned. I don't understand it completely. Can you just explain it to me?
Sure. So the phrasing that the CEC used to use was core and non-core. You had to get a certain number of points in core and a certain number of non-core points. Basically, in the changeover, that core and non-core division disappeared. So CPD just became 100 points. You had to get within every 12 months. So that's how it stands. But one of the things that did change definitely with SEIA, and I was definitely part of pushing for this, which is that we opened it up much more by allowing anybody who could demonstrate that they had reasonable experience in the topic that they were delivering, that they should be allowed to be a trainer and produce CPD content and deliver it. Under the previous scheme, you had to have training and assessment 40116, whatever that is. I've done it myself to be a trainer and assessor, but that kind of just cut down the number of people. And there's all these people in our industry who are working for manufacturers, who are working in retailers, who are doing all sorts of things in the industry, who are a source of wisdom in different areas. And they should, I believed, as SAA's sort of charter said, that we should have those people being able to pass on what they know for CPD points. That was a shift that I think you can see, because since SAA has taken over, there's a much more variety of CPD content out there from all sorts of directions. And in fact, they held a survey recently and found that the thing that people are after is that there's loads of technical training, the sort of stuff I do, but they're after more soft courses about running businesses, how to sell, how to deal with stress in your workplace. That's actually what people are interested in learning about. And so, hopefully, like, that information's being fed back through a working group that SAA holds with CPD providers. So hopefully they will start to deliver those sorts of things that people are looking for. The intention is to make it varied and have lots of content to choose from. So in the past, where people kind of struggled with, there wasn't much content, they do something they weren't even interested in, where now there's so many courses, there's got to be something there that you find interesting while you're getting your points, so you're not just doing it for the sake of it.
Imagine if you could get CPD points for scrolling social media sites, so Solar Cutters and the Me page.
Exactly. The only trick is under SAA, all the CPD training, what's called the ongoing learning component of SAA's CPD training, is that you have to have an assessment task. So you have to have some way of proving that somebody actually did something. You can't just sit and watch a video or listen to something or scroll through a page. You got to demonstrate that you've actually learned something. So
that's the heat pump training coming along.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? You know all about it, Karl. And, you're all over the socials with it. Yeah, definitely. You should.
It's easy. It's
not that hard,
It's easy. I've only got 2 products and you just plug them into the PowerPoint. Not
hard. Keeping the right distance away from a battery system. That's about the only thing.
Really? Didn't know that was a thing, Jeff.
Or keep the battery a good enough distance from the heat pump, depending on your matter of perspective, isn't it?
Absolutely. So the CPD thing, I feel as though, like, my perception of it, I mean, I'm quite engaged with it, but there's just a lot more content, varied content, and, a large proportion of it, I think 75% of it's available online for people. So regardless of where you are, you can get your points without having to travel to events and so on. But of course, the valuable stuff is when you're sitting with other installers at an event. I think when the trainer's rattling off about something or other, people are chatting between themselves and understanding the real situation and interpreting it. So I still think there's a place for face-to-face training.
Absolutely. They've got to have someone to throw tomatoes at, Jeff.
There could have been a bit of that this week, honestly, over the 4777, but it didn't happen. I deflected.
I'm surprised you didn't get tarred and feathered at some point this week. But so as a technical trainer and you're across, having a solar business top to bottom, what advice would you give to solar companies and installers to make their life easier?
Yeah, have a checklist. You kind of mentioned this before. So, using something like Trello or whatever to literally have all the steps in place. Obviously, for me, or if you're in a little one-man band operation, or there's a couple of you, then it might be one person just tracking that process right through. But there are so many steps, and particularly with these rebates and all of that, collecting evidence on the way through, you can't afford to miss a step. So, yeah, checklists are great. And things like Trello make it easy because you can just drop it over onto, copy it over as a template and do the same thing for your next customer. And, of course, using platforms, design platforms, some of them have that process kind of built into it as well. If in doubt, use the digital tools.
So, Jeff, if someone wants to call you and get some help, is that something that you do through the Smart Energy Council? Do you answer the phone? Does anyone ring you?
They do. They're not supposed to, because the SEC doesn't formally have a technical advice sort of hotline. People who belong to master electricians, they have a kind of tech support line. Informally, I get lots of questions. People come through to the switchboard at the SEC and want to know something. To be frank, it's usually because they haven't got a copy of the standard. So they're sitting in a truck somewhere and they're trying to work out how far they can be from that drain pipe, and they don't know and they haven't got a copy of the standard. Often my responses is just flicking through the book and going, oh, you need to look at clause X, Y, Z. That's where it is, because all the rules are there. But I reckon you've got to have copies in the truck or in your phone or whatever so you can check the rules.
You're a walking encyclopedia, Geoff.
Not really. It's all an illusion. Smoke and mirrors. You just spend enough time around it, you kind of get the general gist of it. I have to always go back and check. Someone will ask a question and I'll say, usually, I think it's da-da-da-da. I'll have to go and look because there's a lot to remember. And most times you're right. You're right more times than you're wrong. So you keep your job.
It's still something that installers have to pay for, right? They have to actually pay to get copies of these standards. And people are reluctant to spend any money on anything. They can claim those sorts of things as tax deductions, so they should be having plenty of access, yeah?
Yeah, or groups like Cutters will give you copies, like access. If you're a Solar Cutters member, you can get it through their portal.
Yeah, Smart Installer program as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
There is, and if you're going to go buying them on the web, also always consider that most of the Australian standards we deal with are Australia and New Zealand standards, so they're the same document. So they're AS/NZS 4777.1, for example. And so you can buy the New Zealand copy, and it's exactly the same copy. It's just got the title at the top, Standards New Zealand, rather than Standards Australia. And you'll actually find you'll probably, on a copy of that, you'll save yourself I think it's about $130, $140 by just buying the New Zealand copy.
Life hacks with Geoff. Buy the New Zealand
indeed.
copy.
That's fantastic.
Or get yourself an apprentice who happens to be studying at TAFE, because they have the ability to sign in and print stuff off in the TAFE library. So, and of course that's for free because they're part of TAFE and doing their study. So it's one good reason to get an apprentice and add to our workforce so you can get free copies of standards.
Not to mention the cheap labour.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, a shout out to technically he's not my apprentice, but Bobby, he's just completed his TAFE and he's going to do his capstone in the next week. And he's a really smart young fella. I say young fella, he's in his 20s, and he's doing both becoming an electrician, but he's also got a degree. He's doing a degree in botany, which is his passion. So he's got a lot more sense than I did at whatever he is, 27 years old, getting himself set up nicely.
So, Geoff, we try to ask all of our guests what they do to do the work-life balance, and how to keep yourself centered and calm in this crazy solar world we live in. What do you do? How do you keep yourself on track?
I play the guitar to myself, for myself, and drums, because my son has taken up drums and he's pretty good. And so I go out into the shed that's full of all the solar gear, but there's a sort of second level and the drum kit's up there, and I just go wild on the drums.
What sort of music are you playing?
Oh, he's into metal. My son Tom's into metal, so I have to play along with him. He's got all the riffs, and he's there with his with his amp, and so he's like a 14-year-old kid who's into Metallica, who is still going after 40 years or however long they are. Yeah, I belt some stuff out. With music is the best disconnect for me, because everything we do at work is it's all head, it's not much. There's a bit of heart in there because you feel like it's a good thing to do, be part of the solar industry. We're doing something good, but there's a lot of thinking. So doing something like music's just perfect release.
Sounds like you're halfway to a band. You've got guitar and drums covered.
Yeah. My daughter's a singer too, so.
Mate.
Yeah. But they wouldn't go anywhere near their father, so publicly. Yeah.
Oh, we've got Von Trapp vibes.
If anyone knows anything about Luke's a muso too. He can bash out things on the guitar. He can bash out things on the drums. Nigel's got plenty of gear. What about you, Nigel? You bash out some stuff on the musical instrumentation?
Look, in my earlier days, I was a little bit renowned for a trombone, but those days are long past.
Maybe that should be the live gig at Smart Energy 2025. Forget the podcast. Just you guys get up on stage. Jess, how about you?
Yeah, I mean,
Jess is going to sing. We already locked it in the last episode. She's singing.
Yeah, I really put myself in at AWI's and Pat Southwell's podcast. So I guess I'm on the vocals. I can play a mean ukulele.
And just a reminder, get your tickets to Smart Energy Expo. We're going to be there. Jeff's going to be there. Everyone else is going to be there. Nigel will have his trombone. Jess will be singing. It's going to be amazing. Get your tickets, smartenergyexpo.org.au. Perfect note to whip around and say there's not much time left, and we're just going to get some last comments from everyone. We'll start with you, Jess?
Yeah, shout outs to the couple of people who came and saw me down here in Adelaide to, comments on the podcast and to say hi and such. It truly, really does mean the world to me. I'm honoured to be here amongst legends, and definitely keeps me nice and sharp on things as well. And then the only other thing to mention was off the back of last episode, I was a little harsh on SIG, and I truly do think it doesn't look too shabby. It's just very new and shiny. But interestingly, they got second on the solar quotes in Solar voted best battery of 2025. So certainly lots of people thinking that they're worth a look at.
And you deserve the kudos, Jess. It's been great to have you on board, and you're doing a great job too. Last comments, Karl.
I always get a buzz out of having people like Geoff on the show. He's just such a gold mine of information. The teacup storm thing, as we mentioned, I'll pay $30 to sit in on one of Geoff's presentations any day of the week. He's just such a great asset to the industry. And obviously, if you get a chance to get in on a training session with Geoff, jump at it because it's heaps of fun.
And before I ask for last comments, Nigel, I'm going to ask you, when Karl has a CPD course for heat pumps, will you pay $30 to attend?
Yep. I love to hear Karl's views.
The podcast listeners can't see the gun being pointed at Nigel's head.
No,
I'll definitely be there.
I don't agree with everything Karl says. It's true, but Karl actually is a wealth of knowledge on all sorts of amazing things. So, no, I'd pay $30.
And last comments?
Last comments, very simple. Buy some merch, people. Go to Redbubble, go to the search bar, jump in and type Just Another Solar Podcast and buy some merch. Doesn't make us much money, a couple of bucks here and there, but it helps keep the show on the road. You can be exclusive. You can get stickers. You can get all the good stuff, T-shirts, bucket hats. Please buy some merch. It'll really help us keep the wheels turning.
We can sign it at the Smart Energy Conference.
Damn straight we can.
And Geoff Bragg, thanks for coming on, mate. I'm sure we'll see you around the traps anyway. Any last comments from you?
Oh, just that you guys are all doing a great job here, being a sort of focus for the solar community, and it's really honoured to be asked to come and talk to you. But it does make you feel like you're part of something bigger, to be part of this industry, and people who are really interested in what we're trying to achieve and support each other. So anyway, thank you so much, and everyone keep doing what you're doing because we're winning.
Thanks, Geoff. And now for you listeners, as promised, here's the details for the competition. The Winner Smart Energy Podcast competition. If you've got a great idea, we're looking to unearth the industry's best new talent. So the Smart Energy Council have partnered with Just Another Solar Podcast, and the prize pack includes a high-quality microphone, professional headphones, a full podcast setup and listing on major platforms, including Spotify, Apple, and more, and 1 year worth of podcast hosting, all paid for you. So how do you enter this? How can you be the next podcast legend in the industry? You need to submit your podcast idea to comp@smartenergy.org.au, so COMP, and there's no guidelines, whatever format you like, with or without guests. If you want to bring a trombone, you can do it, but just anything surrounding solar, new energy, renewables, whatever you want to do, submit your idea. The next step is you record your episode in a media booth at the Smart Energy Expo, which we've said the dates, that's the 9th to 10th of April, and it needs to be scheduled in advance. So make sure you get your idea in ASAP. And then the third step is that entries will be assessed by an expert panel, and the highest ranked will have their recording posted as episode 1 on their new podcast. We're going to do all the hard work for you. If you have a good idea, if you think that you can jump in here and be an asset to the industry, we want to help give you a push. Get your ideas into comp@smartenergy.org.au. Thanks for listening. We're looking forward to getting some entries. We also have a couple of spare tickets to the gala dinner and awards night. I haven't worked out how, but we're going to work out that some of those entries will get a free ticket to the gala dinner as well. Thanks for listening. Thanks to everyone on board here, the panel and Geoff, and we look forward to catching you next time. And don't forget to get your Smart Energy Expo tickets. Cheers.